On this episode, we're joined by one of the most respected coaches in the Missouri Valley Conference, the head women's basketball coach at Drake University, Allison Pohlman. Coach Pohlman's story is deeply connected with the Valley, from starring as an all-MVC player at UNI to beginning her coaching career in Cedar Falls and helping build one of the premier programs in women's mid-major basketball at Drake. She spent nearly 3 decades impacting basketball in this league. Since becoming the head coach in 2021, she's led the Bulldogs to conference championships, NCAA tournament appearances, postseason success, and continued a culture of excellence that has become synonymous with Drake women's basketball. She's also a Hall of Fame player, MVC Coach of the Year, recruiter, mentor, and the mother of triplet daughters. She literally does it all. So, Coach Pohlman, welcome to Deep in the Valley.
Wow. Thank you so much for the very, very warm introduction. And I just really appreciate the ask. Anytime you get a chance to talk serious hoops in June, sign me up, because this is really exciting. And I know we're getting really geared up and amped up, especially for the season and upcoming season and the great things that are ahead, not only in the Valley, but here at Drake University.
Coach, and every story has a beginning, right? You grew up in Wellsburg, played high school basketball at Wellsburg Steamboat Run. Talk to the listeners about growing up in the area and how the community shaped your competitive spirit and your work ethic and provided you a platform to succeed and move on to the next level in athletics.
Yeah, I love being a small town Iowa girl. And in this profession, I don't know that a lot of people get the opportunity really to boast. The other one might be Jan Jensen, and Tanya Warren circled around. She headed out of the state for a while and then found her way back to the glorious state of Iowa. But I've been so blessed, so lucky to be able to be not only like a native of this state, but never having to leave. But like grassroots, it's come a long ways. And I'm not really necessarily embarrassed by the fact, but uniquely enough, when we talk about 6-on-6 basketball, we have a drill that we play in our team. And they're like, excuse me, what is 6-on-6? And so my first year of high school athletics, I actually played 6-on-6 and definitely got schooled a number of times by Hubbard Radcliffe superstar and Lisa Brinkmeyer. And so she was a senior when I was a freshman. So definitely got taught a lot of lessons by her. But then being able to ultimately play basketball, play a ton of sports, small town Iowa girl, I played 4 sports in high school, played volleyball, played basketball, ran track, and then played summer softball. It was one of those things that you did to be able to show pride and represent your school when you were everybody was expected to go out. And that's how developed that community. I love the fact that that was a part of your question, because I do think that communities really do get behind the young people who continue to give back to, whether it's to sport or whether just it is to their high schools or their elementary schools or middle schools. And I was very blessed and had a lot of bloody knees and bloody noses and stuff. I had 2 older brothers who, you talk about that competitive edge. It was, you were fighting from the first thing in the morning, you started fighting over cereal. It didn't matter what it was, but you were competing in every single aspect of every single moment of your day. So a lot of credit to them for that. But yeah, just overly proud to be an Iowan.
As a standout athlete in high school, you start to probably get interest from different college programs at a younger age. But can you share what your recruiting experience was like throughout your high school career, and maybe any offers that you had, and ultimately what made you choose the University of Northern Iowa to continue your academic and your athletic career?
Yeah, great question. I had a number of different opportunities to play different sports. I could have played volleyball. I could have ran track. Ended up lucky enough to have a number of different people on our team from a track aspect to be able to win a couple relay races. I did the long jump. I was a state champion in the long jump, so had opportunities to be able to do that. And from a softball standpoint, I also had the opportunity to play softball, but my deep, dark love was for basketball and just the competition piece. And so, Chris, really my opportunities were the University of Northern Iowa, Creighton University, which is what it came down to. And I had a very, in my estimation, different recruiting process than most of the high schoolers that go through it now. And what I mean by that is I didn't sign until late. So I played my senior year, and Tony DeCecco actually was hired the year before spring. And so was lucky enough to have the opportunity where there was Tanya Warren, Colleen Heimstead, who happened to be in small town Iowa gyms coming out and sitting next to probably everybody's relative cheering on the Wellsburg Warriors at the time. And so it was like just a neat opportunity. But I remember going on a visit in April and sitting down with the athletic director at the time, which was Chris Retrieve. And he had asked me blatantly, he asked me the question, like, are you actually coming here or what are you going to do? And I didn't know what to say. So I was on the spot. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come here. And so that was how my career began. And so I was very fortunate. I picked the perfect school for me. It was a great fit. A lot that went into that was the distance from home. It was 25 minutes really from my front door. But there was a lot of things about the University of Northern Iowa that I adored. And like I said, it was a great fit for me.
You just mentioned it as far as the kind of the start of your career at Northern Iowa. It was the start of an incredible career and really the first player, in my estimation, of really getting women's basketball back on track at Northern Iowa, because there were quite a few years of being pretty lean, and looking at you as that star player bringing that basketball tradition back to Northern Iowa. You had over 1,400 points, more than 700 rebounds, nearly 300 steals, all MVC honors, defensive player of the year, and eventually you got inducted to the UNI Athletics Hall of Fame. So when you reflect on your playing career, what stands out the most to you?
Overall, I still remember having a lot of conversations like amongst our team and then clearly like with our coaches. And I think that's what great coaches do, is inspire. It's overall like it's all about your team's success. And my freshman year, I know we're going to talk about the Missouri Valley Conference tournament here soon, but my freshman year, we didn't even make the cut. So we didn't even get the opportunity to go to the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. And so that kind of leaves a really bad taste in your mouth. And I knew what I could do. And we had the pieces in place to be able to really make an inspired effort of trying to put UNI on the map. Like it was ultimately about, hey, we've got to make sure that we're getting to the conference. Like this needs to become a standard for our program. And so I think this was definitely not a singular sort of deal. I was surrounded by wonderful players and teammates who had the same exact mindset. And we went from not making the tournament my freshman year to my sophomore year, finishing third. And so we were very focused to that. I think Tony DeCecco, if you've ever walked into the room, like he could motivate you to like just go ahead and do 100 burpees. Like the guy was a motivator. He would figure out a way. If you had that sense of doubt, he would help you to make sure that quickly vacated the room. So I think like our team's success of just each and every year continuing to build and to understand that the expectation needed to change. And that expectation was not only with our competitiveness and our edginess, but also in understanding that we could do it collectively as a unit, because basketball is definitely a team sport. And I think we were all behind that. We had a lot of the right pieces and we just needed to actually execute a few things on the floor.
So you played in the Valley during an extremely competitive era of basketball. We think about iconic players in the league, yourself included, but Jackie Stiles, for example, played in the league during your time in the league. And maybe even 1998 is a year that I'm thinking about. But Drake was a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Missouri State was an at-large that year and got an 8 seed. So 2 single-digit seeds out of the Valley in 98. And so a couple of years later, the Lady Bears went all the way to the Final Four. And what was it like competing in that era of Valley women's basketball?
Oh my gosh. I'm so happy you said this because we're running camps right now. And I had prefaced or said the name Jackie Stiles. And I was like, everybody's just going to roll over and be like, oh my gosh, she played against Jackie Stiles. But I think it's a name that one of the icons, Carla Bennett, you talk about, you could name a number of players in the league at that time. But I will tell you this, Chris. We were the last team, the University of Northern Iowa, we were the last team that beat Missouri State before they went on their Final Four run. So we, the Panthers, get a lot of credit for that. I think they walked out of the West Gym. I'm sure that they got a number of ears full about their performance, and then they figured out a way to win. So we're taking a little bit of credit over here for that. But no, it was an unbelievable era. You talk about, I could name all kinds of players just across all of the teams. And I think that's where I have such a respect and a deep rooted, affinity for the Missouri Valley Conference, where we can get back there. There are some really phenomenal players that have played in the Valley. And I think that we're just like brimming on that happening again, another wave of that coming really to fruition. And yeah, each and every night, man, it was, you talk about a scouting report that was like 8 players deep, and they were all like, truthfully, what felt like first team all conference players. There was a lot of talent in the league during those years, I would definitely say.
You know, what's really interesting about that game that you won in the West Gym. So I was working at Southwest Missouri State at the time as associate director of
Okay.
Hammond Center. And so I was asked that week to bring the cheerleaders to Cedar Falls. So I was at the game. And
Oh my
it was,
gosh.
as an employee at the time of SMS, it was really hard not to cheer for you guys because I knew all of you guys, the coaching staff. And so I was so proud and so happy that you guys got the win. But it was a really quiet drive back to Springfield that day before that run started. But anyway, that was a phenomenal game. I'm happy to say that I was there.
Yeah, yeah. It was a phenomenal weekend for the University of Northern Iowa Panthers. We had Wichita State. You talk about 2 teams that are no longer in the Missouri Valley Conference. We had Wichita State, which those were always a power punch of trying to play 2 completely different teams and different styles. And so then we had taken Wichita State to overtime, I want to say on Thursday, and then ended up upsetting and beating Southwest Missouri State at our place on Saturday. It was we deserved OP pizza. That's for sure.
Yeah.
After the game, that would have been, we should have gotten that. I'm sure Tony pulled up with some Papa John's, but that would have been a nice treat for us.
So, we talked a little bit about being a complete player with the score, the rebounding, the defensive leader. When you arrived in Cedar Falls, did you ever envision that you'd be that kind of a player?
No, I didn't. I had signed up to play basketball and to show up and be the best version of myself. And just as you uncover it, and really, I think it's atypical for a freshman to step into any specific role and be like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just be a first team all conference player. I think what happens is just really an evolution of you being welcomed in. I think it's all about culture too, and really what the team wants. And I think the situation of stepping into the team at UNI it was just so fantastic because there was just a thirst for success. And I think that whatever that took, whether it was players that could rebound, could score, could do multiple things, I think it was just like I don't know, it was a culture of where winning was really, that was the aspiration. But I would say just leaning into back to those old Iowa roots of you roll it out and you figure out a way to, if you don't have the ball, then you get it back. If you have the ball, then you put it in the basket. And so all of those things, just leaning into kind of those core qualities that got me really where I am today, and always thankful for those opportunities. But I would have never expected that. But I also think that goes back to, I picked a perfect university for myself. That fit, I was able to maximize, I would say, my potential in the type of player and the place that I picked. And I think sometimes we quickly forget that, but I was in a great situation. I picked the right place and found success in that choice.
And Brian mentioned this earlier, and I couldn't agree more, but the teams that you were on at the University of Northern Iowa really helped elevate UNI women's basketball and the brand, not only in the state, but across the Valley. So how much pride do you take in being a part of a team that lasted, and the outcome lasted well beyond your years there as a player?
Yeah, it's such a pride point. It really is. And I think of all of the other women that, that I was in the trenches with. It wasn't just one person, and it wasn't like one year. It was a conglomeration. And I know there was a year we got excluded from postseason and felt a little bit bitter about it. But it just motivated us moving forward. And I think what happened was the type of student athletes that we were able to attract, or the women that I played alongside, just set the stage for what did come in the future. Exactly like what you alluded to, Chris. We were able to attract phenomenal players. You look at Jackie Kalin, whose number is now retired, in the rafters, and what she was able to do. Amy Swisher, Alex Cook. There were so many different players that stayed home, that were from Cedar Falls, that ended up wanting to be a part of what they were doing at UNI. And I was lucky enough to stay on staff for about 7 years after I had graduated. Coaching was never something that I had wanted to do, but you know how doors open and you either sprint through them or you close them. And I was
Mm.
lucky enough to have a coach in Tony DeCecco and Colleen Heimstead and Tanya Warren, who just encouraged. Kelly Westoff was there at the time too, but just encouraged, this doesn't have to be what you're going to do in 25 years. Strangely enough, it is, but just see what happens, take advantage of these opportunities. And thank goodness I was still coachable because I did listen to them actually and found myself in an amazing situation and loving this opportunity of being able to impact young women.
I think that one of the things that I remember from that area, and you just listed a bunch of great players and great coaches, but phenomenal people, even better people. They're people that you could pick up, Brian and I could pick up the phone and call those guys today. If we needed something, they would help us.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's just a special thing. And I think it goes back to when you're fully immersed and you're convicted and convinced that it's the right time, it's the right place, it's the right situation, sky's the limit.
So one last question on the athletic career before we start talking on the coaching journey a little bit. But because of your play, because of your contributions, you ultimately entered into the UNI Hall of Fame. While it's an individual award and want to get your thoughts and opinions on what the recognition meant to you, and maybe point out some of those other areas within the team that don't get quite as much recognition as the star player, but helped you pave the path on that journey.
Yeah. You talk about whether it's rebounds, points, you got to have somebody who's actually going to pass you the ball. But I loved playing with Carrie Dawson. She was our point guard. Nadine Brandt, I still talk to our team about if you want to talk about somebody as pure of a shooter like Nadine Brandt, like I have never seen somebody do that little scissor kick that she did when she shot it. But man, it was like the most glorious, most beautiful of shots. It was so fun. And I still remember Nikki Spettel was our 4 player. Barb Bennett, how do you not mention her? And she was one of the most, I think, under recruited, most dominant posts. And I tell this story too, sometimes not always to our team. It just depends on if I want them to pass it or not. But I still remember playing with Barb and I would pass it into the post. And every time I just start yelling double and she was never double teamed, but I wanted the ball back. And so to be able to have that sort of relationship, I think at a certain point she discovered that I was kind of messing with her a little bit, but those relationships, and there's so many. Fran Reese, I want to say a sophomore when I was a senior. And you talk about the Wichita State game. She hit the biggest 3. I still remember the pass. I could set it up in the West Gym right now if it was still there. But just one of those situations where you just have a blind belief in the people that you're surrounded by. And when I was a senior, Kara Opp was a freshman, and I thought that it was going to be this big, I'm going to show her the ropes. And I was like, wow, she plays defense about maybe better than what I do. And so it was great just to have a lot of fantastic pieces that were just so very well respected and just did so much for my career. And I didn't even mention some of the people when I was a freshman and sophomore. You had Shannon Cadner, Karen Finsky, Adrian Minskell. There were Kelly Westoff was a senior when I was a freshman, Kate Lawler, and now Jen Steffens. And a funny story about Jen, who is doing very well. I think she's a lawyer in Marshalltown, Iowa, actually. And it was so funny because we would always try to if Jen wasn't ready for the game, we'd try to get her ready by missing shots so bad in warmups that she would get hit in the head. Because if we hit her in the head, then she'd get angry. But we knew that then she'd be really ready to play. And so it was like, those are the nuances, like when you're on a team of where it's just fun to sit around and talk about clearly 25, 30 years later. But a lot of fantastic people, kind of to what you said, Chris, but just fantastic people who you want to do that journey with, and you want to walk with each and every day. So yeah, special experience indeed.
You bet. And so you've actually already talked about this a little bit. You said that maybe you had no interest in being a coach, but you went directly from being a player to a coach. And so was there a point then when you realized that, hey, this college coaching thing might be my future?
I guess it was probably when we were loading up the U-Haul and driving to Des Moines. Even when we lived in Cedar Falls afterwards, becoming the graduate assistant and then another position opening and then moving to an assistant coach. And then, I, man, the years go fast. They go really fast. And then getting the call, I would say, to come and work at Drake for Amy Stevens was probably the moment where it was like, okay, this is the time to make the decision on, okay, is this what I'm going to continue to do? Because we were actually loading up 3 9-month-olds at the time. So we moved here right before our girls had turned 1. So there was a lot of decision making in there and a lot of different things that were going to be impacted. And I think that was probably the moment where it was like, okay, I think we can do this. I think this is going to be probably the track that I stick with or stay on. And yeah, not a great answer. Nothing fell from the sky, but I was also just really lucky to have the opportunity to come to Drake. And I've always held Drake in such high regard because back to your point, like historically, if you look up in the rafters of the Knapp Center, you so much success, so many championships, so many unbelievable players and women who have, and just the opportunity, I think, to represent Drake it's a really unique one and something that's really special, in my opinion.
So what are some of those important lessons that you learned during the first 7 years while you were starting on that coaching journey that you have still a part of your coaching philosophy today? Because we know everything can change, but some of those bedrock kind of things that you learned in those first 7 years, what still is a part of you?
Yeah. I think just taking different things from different coaches, like out of different bags, because even in this conversation, I think you can learn something. There's something you can learn about not only yourself or just about just things in general. But I did allude to Tony DeCecco being quite the motivator. He had a saying or a one-liner for what felt like just about everything. So it was great to be able to to be in a different seat. I was, as a player, was completely different. We had a different relationship. Not that it changed that much, but you're doing different things. You have different opinions, things a different way than when you're on the court than when you're off the court. And major lessons are just, I think, just the relationship piece of student athletes and them really understanding that even as a coach on the sideline, what it ultimately all comes down to is your really belief in people, your belief in their skill set, your belief in who they are and what they can do and what they're capable of. Because a lot of times, similarly to me, to my whole journey, there's plenty of people who would have never thought that it would have ended up the way that it did. But if you have that belief, Tanya Warren, Colleen Heimstead, I still remember them coming to my high school games, and they saw something and they had that belief. And so I think that just understanding the power of that and understanding that ultimately we're not getting people who are constantly a 10 out of 10 on the confidence range. And so it's up to us to continue to foster that and to understand that. And I love being able to push people's buttons because I think that's a little bit of the key, the magic sauce. And when you can get to those sorts of like relationships and the depth of that, then you can do some really special things.
So now you've been at Drake for nearly 2 decades. You arrived in 2007, but you were not, as you mentioned, you weren't a stranger to the Drake program because you've been competing against them, both as an athlete and an assistant coach for nearly a decade. So, but what was it like to make that transition after the U-Haul was packed from Cedar Falls to Des Moines?
It was, you could have said I was like crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It felt like it was such a change. I was no longer in the state of Iowa. And I also have to say, Cedar Falls became so comfortable. It was, once again, 25 minutes from my hometown. I thought that Des Moines was this big, scary place that I wouldn't be able to navigate. And it was going to take me an hour and a half to cross to go from, we live in Johnston, but to drive from Johnston to Drake's campus. I had these, I don't know, different thoughts that were completely not even close to being true, but stepping outside my comfort zone and coming here. But just learning a number of different things and diving into taking a chance. And that's when you get really uncomfortable. A lot of times that's when you end up growing. And there was so much growth for me, really, in even that first year. And it still is really interesting when you're going through the line, and high-fiving when you like, it's always a great matchup. The Bulldogs against the Panthers. You talk about, it's always been quite the rivalry. But those first couple years were really interesting. It's just, you just almost feel like an imposter. You're going through that line and you're like, wait, which one am I? But I will admit this. I've never made the mistake of coming center circles and being like, go Panthers. I've not done that. So I know that as a tendency sometimes to happen to people, but that has not happened to me. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself for that. But no, it was definitely a little bit strange, but I would say it was a welcomed opportunity, and yeah, no looking back.
Hey, when fans come to watch your team play, Coach, what do you want them to see? What do you hope they're saying about Bulldog basketball when they leave the arena?
The number one thing that I hope is when they leave, what they're saying and what they've just seen is a bunch of women that absolutely positively love basketball. And they're doing it with a smile on their face. And I'm not saying like only when they're having success. I still think you can problem solve and do a lot of things and yet still enjoy what you're doing. And so I would definitely say that just overall leaving, that they have a sense that they love to compete, that they love basketball, and then ultimately that they're representing their institution. So they love Drake. And I think that can shine through in their body language, in what they do, how they present themselves, and just you walk into a room and you can get a sense on how people operate and who they are and what they stand for. And so I want us to walk into the arena, into the NAF Center, into any place that we play, with just an overall sense of confidence in who they are and what they represent. So that would be what I hope our fans are leaving saying, and that we finished with more points.
Yeah.
The team
Yes.
you just described, the identity, culture, are those traits a part of your personality?
Oh, that's a great question. I hope so. But I also hope it doesn't. I have the best job in America. I love what I do. The games are great, but I love practice. I just love it. I love being able to watch our women grow. Yes, they fail, but failure recovery is also, this is life. You're going to have things. Somebody's going to knock out your power. And so then you're going to have to figure things out. So these are all things that are relative to like things that happen, and probably a little bit, but I'm also not one that's going to take a ton of credit for how my representation of myself or what our team does. But I do think that my hope is that they leave better versions of themselves than when they got here.
We talk a little bit about with the coaches about building their roster and maybe their philosophy. And so when you're looking for players to build your roster at Drake, what are some of the details? Obviously talent, right? But what are some of the intangibles that make a woman a great fit for a student athlete at Drake University?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that's done through a lot of evaluation and a lot of like character background checks, and how do you treat people, and do you know the janitors' names? Like when you're in the hallway, are you telling people thank you for doing their job? And I think I've always had this as an example. We watch so much basketball. We watch so much AAU basketball. And I said to our coaches before, the fastest way to be checked off my list is the moment that a young lady shows up to an AAU game and they pick up their water bottle and they start shaking it at their mom or their dad. I'm like, one, you knew you were going to get thirsty, for one. So you have no planning going on, and you're expecting someone else to do something for you that you could have done yourself. And so I think some of those intangible pieces, and I'm making a joke here, but just those small things, those character traits, and we get them for 4 and now 5 years. And so now you want to make sure when you're surrounded by these young people that you can relate, that you can push their buttons, that you can make them better versions of themselves. And so I think just that those character pieces that really shine through are those things. Just be a good human being. And you can see that in, I think, how people represent themselves and how they treat people. But you also got to be like real competitive. That talent piece is a really big one to fit into what we do systematically on the offensive end.
Let's talk a little bit about last season. It's obviously a season that we're going to spend just a small portion on, because it was, in my estimation, and looking at past history, it was a blip on the radar, right? You go 12-20. You have some injuries, you have some new players that didn't maybe necessarily come up to the way that you wanted them to. Injuries, it has a lot to do with that. But when you're used to having consistent success and you have something like last season occur, what did you and your staff kind of learn, and how have you incorporated that into moving forward with this new team in 26-27?
Yeah, really great question. And what I think the biggest takeaway is that coaching is as glorious as it is. It can be like a really lonely occupation. And just fully knowing that there's at any given year, there's a lot of people that go through exactly what we went through. And I've tried to, over the course of the last few years, like reaching out to people when you know that things are hitting, because there's only certain things. Coaches can relate to coaches a lot of times. And so just being that sounding board for people that are going through what feels like tough times. We did, man. We just got punched in the face 2, 3, 4 times. And I think it was I don't know if the universe is trying to tell us that we have been so blessed with so many unbelievable point guards that then this year we had 3 who sustained season-ending injuries. And so I'm not sure if that was just, I don't know, that, hey, let's see if Allison can figure this out. But we gained so much experience. We learned a lot about ourselves. I think like individually, I learned a lot about myself and how I operate in that space. But I do think one of the things characteristically about Drake and about our teams is we do get better. And we did get better this year. And we did start to play our best basketball at the end of the season. And so I think that was a real positive that we were able to lean into. Now, the 11-game losing streak of our non-conference schedule, whoever did that needs to be fired. It was me. I did it. But just understanding also, we want to play some of the best, and we had to take some knocks and learn some lessons about ourselves. But I also think those are going to be things we reflect on and hopefully grow from as we head into, and not forget those things as we head into this year.
And so that brings us maybe to this point of the year. You said you love practice. And we had Brian Jones, another former UNI Panther that's at Bradley now. He said June and July are his favorite 2 months of the year because he's a gym rat. And so we'd love to hear about how the summer is going, maybe how the roster is shaping up, and what does the student athlete schedule look like in June and July?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually run summer camps. So we're right in the thick of things. We have about 3 weeks of summer camps where, I don't know, we have between 750 and 800 young people who come through Drake, who leave with a basketball and Drake gear, and they're all geared up and they're excited for Drake women's basketball. So I think it's a great way for us to be able to give back to our community, is to offer those camps, and the women on our team do a nice job of that. But around that, practice wise, during these camps, they're on their feet a lot. So we find some time, we try to be conscientious of how much time we're utilizing in practice. But heading into next week, we'll dive in and we'll practice. We're allowed 8 hours each week with our student athletes. And so they'll spend time in the weight room, and then we'll get after it in the gym. And so I think if not necessarily in today's age, but competitively, you want your team in the gym each and every single day getting up shots, and they're working on their craft, and they're able to continue their own player development, which I think is happening, and they have access to all kinds of gym space and however else. So the summer is for that, but I also think it's for developing chemistry with some new players. So to our roster, we have 3 freshmen, 2 from the state of Iowa, Grace Fincham and Karis Finley. So one from Cedar Falls, one from Iowa City, and then a young lady from Kansas City, and Alex Couch. So we have 3 freshmen, and then we have 10 returners. And then we also added 1 transfer, Allie Myers, who came to us from Tarleton. She's from Texas. She's originally from New Mexico. So we have 4 new additions, and I need to continue to be really thankful, but we have 10 returners. And so that to me is a huge space for us to celebrate and to lean into. And we gained a lot of experience last year with a lot of players. And so now moving forward, getting healthy, our 2 ACL kids one has been cleared, and one is probably about 2 weeks from being cleared. So as we really start this 2026-27 season, for the most part, we're going to do it healthy. And I'm extremely excited about that. And we'll never, ever again take for granted having a fantastic listing of point guards on our team.
So we're going to let the schedule maker get an opportunity to redeem herself here just a little bit. But you did mention a little bit on the competitiveness of the scheduling, the challenges that you like to have with the team. Maybe talk a little bit about the construction schedule, because building a schedule is not easy. There's a lot of people that don't want to play Drake. But the one thing I do think is very nice within the women's game in the state of Iowa is you do get those home and homes with Iowa and Iowa State. And maybe talk a little bit about the importance of being able to still be able to play those in-state rivalries.
Yeah, Brian, that's a great question. And I think if I'm throwing anything out there, I think some other programs of a different gender could take the lead from the women's side and be able to do some of those things, because I think it's just phenomenal for our state. And I love the fact that Jan and Bill agree to do this, not only with us, but also with Tanya over at UNI. And I think it's great for fans, because even if you show up and you happen to be a Drake fan, and we're playing at Iowa State, you're going to leave and you're going to still cheer for Iowa State afterwards. There's the basketball in our state, women's, men's, is really, it's phenomenal. And there's a great way for all of native Iowans to get behind our teams and to cheer for them and send them all positive vibes, because there's so many fantastic stories. But yes, we will actually host Iowa this year. We'll have them at home and we'll be at Iowa State. We added a home and home series with Kansas, so we'll play them. We're actually hosting our own Thanksgiving tournament, so we'll be home for Thanksgiving this year. Have a number of other mid-majors that are coming in. We play Creighton each and every year. Coach Flannery agrees to that as well, which I think we would love to have him back in the Valley. There's so many different Missouri Valley Conference teams that once upon a time used to regularly come to Des Moines, but so it's nice to be able to play Creighton too, and it's relatively close. But our schedule's geared up, and now we get a chance. We're waiting. We'll see. Hopefully our Missouri Valley Conference schedule will come, and it'll be a little compressed for the women, because since we're now a part of Arch Madness, our schedule will be 1 week shorter, because we used to play a little bit later. And we've held a weekend in December, so I know we'll start our conference play in December. But just overly anxious and excited for all of those things to come upon us.
So you started the conversation. The conference office made an announcement the other day about the significant changes to Arch Madness. Talk to us about your level of excitement in maybe bringing Valley women's basketball under that same brand, that postseason brand of Arch Madness in 2027.
Yeah, I think the women's coaches, are committed to staying extremely flexible. And if this is what is best for our conference, then I think all of us happen to be on board. We had our Missouri Valley Conference meetings, and it felt collectively like we all knew that the change was coming. And as Chris, as I alluded to, back when I played, we were at conference host sites. We went from Springfield to Des Moines to Springfield to Des Moines, and then you threw a Normal, Illinois in there. They hosted 1 year, and then we went to St. Charles. And so then we played there for a number of years, and then we went to Moline, and then this last couple of years we played hopscotch. We went to Evansville, we went to Coralville, and then we were supposed to be due back in Moline, and now we're going to combine. And I think from the women's side and the perspective of having a home, I think it's a great opportunity for us. I think we're going to learn a lot of things over the course. You don't just throw 2 tournaments together and all of a sudden get it perfect on the very first try. But I think that there's going to be effort. I think there's going to be a commitment. I think that there's going to be, our Missouri Valley Conference staff is committed to wanting to do this in the best way possible. So falling under the Arch Madness brand, I think it's an amazing opportunity for our fans. I think it's an amazing opportunity for a basketball fan just in general to come and watch both a men's tournament and a women's tournament in the Midwest. You can go see the Arch. There's all kinds of things you can do in St. Louis from what I hear. And just be able to enjoy some great basketball, and definitely looking forward to it. It's not going to be without a couple snags here and there or critics by any stretch, but I know from our perspective, we're very open, very excited, and just looking forward to a great new venue to call home.
It's just only been a couple days since the announcement, but you mentioned it about places to go with that day off on Thursday, because I'm assuming Drake will win that first round game if they have to play. If we return to the top and that 1 or 2 seed, obviously I'm not going to play, but any first impressions with the way the bracket shakes out, maybe that day off, and kind of how that is going to be a little bit different than past tournaments?
Yeah, I think it's all going to be brand new. And I also think what's really unique on Saturday with the windows of our semifinal games for the women falling bright and early in the morning, and then you got two men's games and then the game at night. I think it all lends to just different planning. But like back to you're playing basketball in March. What's better than that? And there's not that there's no secrets by that time, and everybody will be doing their scouting and everybody will have different wrinkles and everybody will have as long as your team is feeling great, feeling confident, stepping on the floor and playing your best basketball in March, there's a lot of things I think that can continue to trickle down and go your way as people start to just to hit their stride at that time of year. And so there's everyone's going to be tired, everyone's going to have played a number of games or days or on the day in between. We're going to have to make probably some new friends, whether it's at St. Louis University or at Lindenwood or some other college campus, to be able to get on a basketball court, to be able to practice while we're there. But these things are all not new to any of our teams. These are things that we were doing while we were in, whether it's Evansville or whether we were in Coralville too. So easy peasy.
So we love to end episodes with rapid fire questions, some quick hitters.
Okay.
Talk to us a little bit about your favorite gym in the Valley besides the Knapp Center.
Favorite gym in the Valley besides the Knapp Center? I would have to say Redbird Arena.
Okay.
And toughest road environment in the conference.
Toughest road environment in the conference. Let's go UNI.
Nice. Did you have a favorite basketball player growing up?
Favorite Pistol Pete Maravich.
Nice.
Do you have any pregame rituals or superstitions?
Coffee, lots of it.
Oh,
Superstitions, no, not really. I used to tell a joke, but then they didn't think they were as funny as I did.
nice. Talk a little bit about maybe the toughest player, Valley player, that you've ever had to game plan for, and maybe as a player or a coach.
Try guarding Jackie Stiles when she had the spin move. That was tough. I would also say Amy Amstutz from Indiana State. I always got the call on trying to have to guard her. And game plan against in the Valley. Let's see, in the last couple years, it has, if you want to talk like most recently, I think Curry Jelks at Murray State has given us some problems, especially because you got like Hallie Polk is pretty dynamic. So being able to guard them both on the exterior and the interior, I would say that combination I've been pretty impressed with. And in trying for us to stop has been tough.
Nice. One word that describes Drake women's basketball.
Edgy.
Nice.
Like,
is there a non-conference game this season that you can talk about? Is there a non-conference game or trip that you're really looking forward to this season?
There's a lot of games I'm looking forward to because we have a lot of paybacks to actually hand out, because last year it was just not our best by any stretch. But travel-wise, probably our trip maybe up to Ames.
yeah. So one thing Bowes and I like to know from all the Valley coaches is if we come to a Drake home game, and before we head to the Knapp Center, where are you going to send us for a pregame meal? And do you have a go-to order from that establishment?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to give you two. If you want to hang out with our parents, go to Lucky Horse, and then you have to get the buffalo cauliflower off of the appetizer menu. It is unbelievable. And if you like Brussels sprouts, Lucky Horse for sure. They have really good Brussels sprouts. If you want a burger, I would also say the Library, which is over on 42nd Street. So you're going to go there and you're going to get a burger and like whatever sort of French fry you like, whether it's sweet potato fries or regular fries. But both places, you can't go wrong.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us today on Deep in the Valley. Any last comments you want to share about Drake women's basketball before we let you go?
No, just go Bulldogs. And thank you guys so much for the time, and looking forward to, you just made my day because I got a chance to talk about basketball here in June. So looking forward to another fantastic year, and always grateful to be at Drake.
Awesome. So Coach Pohlman, thank you so much for spending time with us today. You've impacted the Missouri Valley Conference as a player and a coach for a long time. Your story is one of the ones that makes the Valley such a special league. So We appreciate you for joining us on Deep in the Valley. And thanks for joining us for another episode of Deep in the Valley. Be sure to subscribe, follow, listen wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on X on Deep in the MVC. So from Cedar Falls to Des Moines, Nashville to Normal, Carbondale to Chicago, for Brian Duttler, I'm Dr. Chris Bowser. Until next time, keep it right here, Deep in the Valley.